I think one of the single most important lessons I ever learned came from Mark Andreessen, and it was the most important thing in product is knowing what you can't know. And most founders don't know that.
Yeah.
And most leaders don't know that. Most product managers don't know that.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TruthWorks. I am your host, Jessica Neal, and I have exciting news. My co-host, Patty McCord, and I are going to be recording an episode together this week. So she is coming back from her surgery, and we're going to get filled in on what's been going on with her. But more importantly, not that her health isn't important, because it is. We love her to be healthy. But I have an exciting guest today, and I think maybe a kindred spirit of mine. Today, my guest is Marty Cagan, and Marty is probably, very, very well known in Silicon Valley, very well known in the product community, and has been one of the most influential leaders and thinkers in this space. And he and I talk a lot about the same things, which is how we all kind of get in our own ways, and process can be the death of things. And so I'm so excited to unpack this with Marty. Also, you guys have probably read a bunch of his books because he has many. But Marty, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thanks very much, Jessica. Thanks for inviting me. I'm doing well.
Yeah. Well, tell people a little bit about your background, because I think you were a product leader and you were at Netscape and eBay, I think. And then you went off and kind of started your own firm to consult and help people do product development better. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
But I'm sure there's a lot more to the story than just that. So tell us everything.
Well, mostly I'm old. I've been doing this so very long. Literally, this year I hit 45 years of working with tech product teams. So
wow,
it's just a very long time, but it's super fun job. So I just keep doing it as long as I can. I started as an engineer. So I studied computer science, and the first 10 years of my career was as an engineer. At the time, because we're talking really the 1980s, the Google of the day was HP, Hewlett-Packard, HP Labs. I was in their applied research lab, and it was a fantastic place to learn both the craft of product and engineering, but also, I honestly didn't appreciate this until after my time at HP, but an amazing culture. Just one of the original great product cultures.
Mm-hmm.
It was known as the most consistently innovative company of its day. You'll appreciate this given your people ops background, but I literally, for the first 10 years of my career, every single day, I had someone, at least one person, sometimes two, responsible for helping me get better at my job.
Mm-hmm.
And that was normal there. It was just later that I realized so many people have none of this. They're just thrown into the deep end, and they either learn to swim or they get fired, and it's
right.
Sad. But for me, I had this great environment to learn, and especially engineering leadership, which is what my original career.
And HP was really, that was the place to be at that time.
It was. There were two companies that were really leading at the time, HP and Apple. And that would have been a great place to be too, for sure.
Yeah.
But in fact, Apple was in many ways our inspiration. And we were not far from each other, and there was a lot of people going back and forth. So
I'm sure.
Yeah. So anyway, but then I was very lucky because I was in the right place in the right time. And as you might know, Netscape was the original internet company. It was kind of the same role for the internet that OpenAI is playing for AI. It was right the epicenter of this new wave. And I worked directly for the co-founder, Mark Andreessen, and it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
an experience in both new ways of doing everything and also just really great people it was like a magnet bringing people from all over the world
Yeah.
that really were the kind of people that invent great things.
Yeah, no, the people that I've known that worked at Netscape in those very early days, they were all quite exceptional. Like it was a really, really great team.
It was, and
Yeah.
I learned so much from so many of them. And then I ended up really getting to know the co-founder of eBay, Piero Major, and thought he had this amazing vision and joined them pretty early as their first head of product. And then after that, I just wanted to write and advise, and I love startups. I had been with several startups that grew to bigger companies, and so it's a really fun ride. And so I wanted to just spend my time doing that. I had really no idea that I'd still be able to do it. It's worked out to be half of my career was an operator at companies, and half of my career is an advisor to others. And so, yeah, it's
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I've moved over to the VC side, but I also do a lot of advising, not only in the VC world, but outside. So it is really fun because I was an operator for so long, and now I have this pattern recognition, and you can really help people kind of you've seen the movie. you know how it ends. And so it's like, let me help you. I know how it's going to go. So I'm glad that you've gotten to, sprinkle your wisdom, around, because I'm sure you learned a thing or two, which I want to talk about because you sort of went on sort of a mission to help people have more productive product teams, and maybe, your beginnings at HP really helped you understand what great product development looked like. But you kind of said it yourself. You didn't know until you had left, like what a gym it was, right? So what was it that you learned, through the rest of your career that kind of helped you develop like a pattern recognition and realize like what actually makes not only great product development, but great teams operate, right? Because I think it's not just about product development. It's about just working in general.
It is right. But I learned really early in my career that companies, and this was no question, huge influence of the founders of HP. But look, companies are only as good as their products, right? Their products are what they sell. That's what fuels everything. But great products come from great product teams. And so it's very much all of the best companies I know. Netflix was a great example, is the people are really the foundation of this because that's who's on these product teams. And so the people, how those people work results in great products, which results in a growing business and happy customers. So this is the sort of virtuous cycle I grew up with. Really every role in a company takes a place, but some roles are much more influential than others on whether or not you get happy customers. And I've always been drawn to the ones that are right at the center of impact for that. So that's been my interest forever. I will tell you that when I left HP, I was super confused. Just very confused because I didn't really realize until then just how different it was between how the best companies worked and the rest. And during my time at HP, I spent time at Apple, I spent time at Microsoft, I spent time with other good companies. So I kind of knew, and I saw this world, which I realized later was a bubble, right? Yeah. So the sort of Silicon Valley bubble, maybe Silicon Valley and Seattle bubble. And then I realized that most of the world does not, they're way different. And furthermore, there was such an obvious, strong correlation between the good companies, how they worked, and their business results, and the rest.
Right.
And so I couldn't understand why the rest were still working like in the 70s, really. Some really old, obsolete ways. And then, you start to, like you said, recognize patterns. You start to see root causes. Question about how could it be that there are so many bad companies out there at this point?
Yeah.
Is what drove me and really still drives me around the world. But now it's not, the good companies are found all over the globe, but the bad companies are found all over the globe too.
Yeah, it's true. They're both everywhere. What sort of the confusion and kind of thinking and tinkering on this root cause problem. What have you found the root cause to be, the difference between being great and just okay or bad even?
I mean, the word that we all sort of use that is very imprecise but is meant to cover this is really culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean country culture, of course.
Yeah.
I mean company culture. In
Yeah.
particular, we mean product culture, which is how does a company make decisions? Who makes the decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Is data play a role, or is it just the boss
Right.
that makes the decisions? And these are really the result of all these little decisions that are made and actions that are made. And that's what we refer to as culture. And we can point to specific things like who does make which decisions? How do they make those decisions? Do they think they're just smarter than everyone and so they can make it and they're going to be right? Or do they realize, I think one of the single most important lessons I ever learned came from Mark Andreessen, and it was the most important thing in product is knowing what you can't know. And most founders don't know that.
Yeah.
And most leaders don't know that. Most product managers don't know that. And so it's really important for them to learn that lesson. They usually do sooner or later, but too often it's later.
Some do, some don't. Yeah,
Right.
Sometimes it's too late. Yeah, because is it letting go, or is it thinking that you know everything? Because
I mean, it's really arrogance.
Yeah, it is.
Thinking that
I think I was trying to be too nice.
Yeah, but maybe the nice way of framing it is the characteristic that I think is incredibly important is humility. It's just you have to know what you don't know, and then you have to be a student of how do you learn what you don't know that you need to know. And that's what every good company I know is good at, is it's not like they know it. And we were talking Steve Jobs. He didn't know the answer, but he knew that this is the kind of thing you do to get an answer. So you do it, show him, and he'll tell you if it's good enough.
Yeah. And I mean, same with Reed, I mean, to think like Steve and Reed certainly had vision, but they didn't know like that it would work. And I think they were both, I don't know about Steve. I know Reed was, had humility and humble, but they were both real big learners and experiment. Right. And I think like you have to fail to learn where to go next.
Yeah, and I think they both, Steve Jobs was sort of, people misunderstood. He wasn't the nicest person all the time, and so people assume, but he will also, of all the companies I've ever been in the world, and I don't know how many I've been in at this point, but Apple does more prototypes than any other company, and you only do a prototype if you know you're probably wrong.
Right.
And that was the culture there. They knew, and so it's not like he said it needs to be like this. He's like, all he was good at saying really was, this is not very good.
Right.
And you have to do better.
Right.
And that's what good leaders should do.
Right.
But he was famous for, a great example, which is going to sound very much like Netflix. Steve Jobs was famous for saying, we don't hire all these engineers to tell them what to build. We hire these engineers so they can show us what's possible.
Right. Yeah. No, and this sort of leads us to the next thing is, our whole philosophy was hire the best people and then get out of their way, give them a lot of context, but don't control them. Right. And I think we also were I think this is something that you're passionate about too. We always saw a pattern of when companies were scaling and growing, and you and I both know scaling and growing is incredibly challenging. It's super hard. And there's this desire, I think, to control that chaos, and how most companies control that chaos is with process. And then those processes are well-intended, right? They are, but they don't ever really solve the problem. And then they end up slowing the whole company down. Innovation starts, decreasing. Empowerment and people making, using their brains and making judgment calls, stops. And then the next thing you know, your competitor who isn't doing that comes in and takes a big market share.
Well, famously, Steve Jobs Elon Musk likes to say this, that at companies, process is used as a substitute for thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really true. But I should, I think one of the things I've learned, Jessica, is that, and what you just said had a really important truth in there, but it was buried with something that misleads people.
Okay.
The way you said it, I think was, you learn, hire really good people and get out of their way.
Yeah.
But you give them context.
Yes.
So here's the thing. People hear, get out of their way. They don't hear, what's that context thing?
Yes.
So
no.
You might have, if you've been following in the sort of online, there has been for the last 2 years, all this angst that's referred to as founder mode.
Yeah.
And founder mode is a backlash that happens every 3 to 5 years, like clockwork. For 40 years, I've seen this happen. Steve Jobs famously revolted against it in 1995. He said, look, you can't just hire smart people and get out of their way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't.
It doesn't work. And people learn that. And so, yes, we all know at this point that micromanagement is not really, you don't hire these caliber people and micromanage them. What a waste of money and brain power.
Right? Exactly.
But on the other hand, and this is a really serious problem for leaders don't understand this, almost as bad as micromanagement is undermanagement.
Mm-hmm.
And hire smart people and get out of their way is undermanagement.
Yes.
Now, as you know, Netflix has a mantra, which is lead with context, not control.
Yeah,
which it beautifully captures what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Because that's the difference. And that's the part that people don't hear. They just hear hire smart people and get out of the way. But no, hire smart people and lead with context.
Yeah.
That's the full part they need to go. Because the context is what helps teams make good choices.
Exactly. And we talk about this a lot in the podcast, maybe ad nauseum to some of the listeners, but I can't help it. But because now that I get the privilege of advising, you go into these organizations and you just see how unclear things are. At small companies, medium companies, big companies, people don't understand what they should be doing. And companies aren't clear about who they are, what they're expecting, right? And what the goal is, right? And maybe that top layer knows, sometimes not, right? But the kind of lower you go in the organization, the less clear it is. And it's a real disease in a sense.
This is the other, instead of lead with context, this is what lead with control looks like. Usually when I do sit with the C-suite, they do have a picture of what they want. But then, of course, in the command and control model, it's all divide and conquer. Okay, you take this. And imagine as it goes down through 7 levels of an organization, by the time you're a team trying to build something, you're just given marching orders.
Yeah.
And you're actually a mercenary, not a missionary at this point. So you're just there to do what the boss says, even when the boss doesn't even have that whole picture.
Right.
So that's what's going on in these companies. And it's not like malintent or anything.
No,
but this is right at the root of why so many companies just don't innovate.
Right.
They just can't. That model is not a model for innovation.
No. So what do we do? What do we do, Marty? Save the world.
I mean, there's sort of 2 ways I see.
Okay.
One way is, and this is what a lot of boards are doing right now. They're bringing in leaders that do know. They're bringing, in fact, obviously, Amazon leaders, Netflix leaders, Google leaders, they're incredibly in demand.
Yeah.
Because the board says, look, we don't have time to mess with this. Let's just bring in some people that have been there, done that, because we're tired of trying to explain it to people.
Right. Yeah.
And the boards, they don't necessarily know themselves. They just know that they're very objective on this. They look at the valuations of these companies and they look at the valuations of their company and they're like, we need people that know how to get us those valuations.
Right.
So they don't know the details. They just know there is something there. So that's one way, is bring in leaders. And about half the successful, at this point, we help a lot of companies try to move from not very good to very good. And that's about half of them. They take that path. They bring in leaders that have been there, done that. It's probably the highest likelihood of success, but it's pretty disruptive. And when you bring in those leaders, the first thing they do is bring in leaders, and then
then they fire all the people that don't know how to do it. Yes.
Yeah, and it can be incredibly disruptive. The other approach is that when the leaders have potential, and like the board believes the leaders have potential, the CEO believes the engineering leaders have potential, but they've just never done this, then that's where product leadership coaches, engineering leadership coaches, that's about the other half of the successes, where they bring in somebody who for somewhere between 3 months and a year or so will coach them, the leaders, on how this works, so that the leader is learning it at the same time they're doing it. And that works you have to have a good coach.
Call Marty.
No, I mean, we have an informal network of coaches we recommend because we're only a few people. We can't do it with everybody.
Well, Marty will know who to call.
We do know who to call. We don't have any money relationships because we want it to be all based on merit, but it is, there's about 50 good product leadership coaches that we know around the world. There's hopefully more than that, but that we know and can personally vouch for. But anyway, you do need to have a good coach. And, the truth is that those people do have to have the potential. Sometimes we have to have an awkward conversation with, the CEO. It's like, that leader is never going to get there. I'm sorry. So you're going to need to make a change there. That's not the norm, but that does happen sometimes because, it's, companies care about what the leaders care about. And so those leaders are everything.
Yeah, no, it's true. It sounds, so you can hire your way out of this, or you can coach your way out of it. Which one's faster?
It's a hard question because honestly, there's real advantages to keeping your people that know the business and know the culture. And if you can keep the people, that's what we encourage because that is usually faster. But if you can't, then your only chance really is
to hire
some leaders. Yeah.
What have you experienced? Because I've just experienced this. I think a lot of, and you were talking about this earlier, like who makes decisions, how we make decisions. Like companies have to have a great culture, right? And they have, and I think culture is just used way too broadly. It's your operating system. It's how you work. Right. And you were describing it's how we make decisions, how we get alignments, how we decide, who to hire. It's how we decide who to fire. It's how teams work together. But a lot of companies have put some thought into this because there's no company out there that doesn't have like a culture, manifesto or whatever. But they put some thought into it, but they haven't put, this is just what I experienced. They haven't put enough deep thought into it. Right. And then they don't go back and re-look at it and tweak it because when they were 50, now that they're 200, it's different, right? And they haven't made the adjustments. But then they're also not living it every day, if that.
Absolutely.
I don't know. So
no, because we can write about culture all we want. We can put anything on the wall we want, unless it's lived every day. And not just by the senior managers. I tell these senior managers what really matters is your first level managers, the people coaching the individual contributors. If they're not living it, it's all just theater. So this is, we refer to the term, the product operating model, which is the principles that actually define a good culture. So that's a lot more precise, but most people don't really know what product operating model is, but they know culture sort of ish. Right. It's one of those things like, this feels like a really good culture, but they don't know why it's a good culture.
Right.
So you can go drop in and sit down with a team at Netflix and you can go, wow, look at how they make decisions. Look at how they run experiments. Look at how they're engaging with customers. Look at how they engage with leverage the technology. This is awesome. But you can see that and not know what actually makes it work. That's a much different question. What are the things that what are the beliefs? What are the principles that they have? And once you understand those principles, then you can start saying, all right, how do I learn how to work this way? How do I learn to be like?
Yeah. And I mean, look, we spent an enormous amount of time teaching people how to do it because it was almost like we had to deprogram like people, the
We
ways.
usually do.
Yeah, like they had learned to work at Microsoft and they'd been there for 15, 20 years. And we're like,
Yeah.
no, we're going to do it totally different. And we spent a lot of time building, and this wasn't like us sending people to like management 101, that we were not doing that. But we ended up hiring at some point like case study writers to write case studies, like so that people could like learn when it worked, when it didn't work, why, like, and could like, because as I was trying to teach people this, it used to be learned because there were so many people that knew it. And so you could see it around you and you could watch people and you could learn how they were doing it and you could see it in action. But then we continued to get bigger and there were more and more new people and more new leaders. And so that wasn't the thing. And so it was, I was like, how do I get people to see it and work through it and experience it, because they weren't getting to experience it, when they walked in the door. And that was like how we did it through case studies. But I think a lot of, I don't want to be too general, but I don't think a lot of companies spend a lot of time working hard at it. And it is a lot of hard work.
They don't. And the truth is, like, Netflix had a huge advantage because Netflix, the culture was so deeply embedded. Imagine you're not Netflix and all you know is we suck and we need to get better.
Yeah.
And so what do? You're hiring constantly from somewhere else. What often happens is that they hire people, and they usually do try to hire reasonable people, but they're coming, and if most people that you recruit in, they think you're hiring them because of what they've learned at their previous jobs. And yet you're hiring them from Oracle, which is unfortunately terrible at this stuff. And so what do you expect those new people to do? They're going to go and bring what they learned at Oracle. And then the company's like, yeah, this just doesn't work. No, what you need to do is have a really open conversation as part of onboarding, if not part of interviewing. As part of onboarding, what you described with your case studies, we always advocate a sort of a new hire boot camp where they learn this stuff.
Right.
And case studies are great ways of learning. But in any case, there needs to be an explicit conversation that's like, we hired you because of your brain. We definitely didn't hire you because of your work experience at Oracle.
Right. In fact, leave that behind.
Leave that far, far behind. And, obviously you judge yourself. Do you want Netflix's innovation or do you want Oracle's innovation? It's not an accident. So the company needs to know that they intentionally, explicitly want to go somewhere different. There's nothing wrong. In fact, a lot of great people come from Oracle because they were acquired. And that's what Oracle does, because they can't really innovate, they acquire. And they've acquired good companies, and you need to make sure that they don't try to bring what their most recent last few years was. And that only happens, in my experience, when you have a very upfront, honest conversation saying, that is not why we hired you, so be very careful here.
Yeah. And we, when I think about it, we were actually really good at that. And I mean, we did it from the interview process. Like, this is who we are. This is how we work. I mean, it was, the contract in many sense was very clear, like average performance gets you a nice severance check, exceptional performance, you keep your job. If any of those things were scary to people, like, don't come.
It's almost, I'll be honest with you, Jessica, I don't use, even though I would rate Netflix is one of my all-time favorite companies, product companies. I don't use them as an example much.
Why?
Because Netflix pays outrageous salaries.
That's not true. I'm gonna help you with this. You think we do. So we pay this, I'll break it down how this misconception
in the product and engineering world, you really do.
Well, I think the misconception is we pay differently, but not more than Google and other places. So we think about things in terms of total comp, right? And everybody else gives you base, bonus,
Base
and
plus.
equity. So we're not giving any more cash than Google or, Facebook or whoever, Apple. It's just we don't break it down into base, bonus, and equity. We just give you the cash. And then if you want equity, you can participate in equity. So annually, they're not making more than what they would at Google. They're making
Or
the
what
same.
they could at
What they
Google.
could, right? But I mean, who doesn't get their bonus at Google?
Well, I mean, this is where there's a real perceived difference from
Yeah.
people. But I also think that, and also I would say, on the good side, the average employee talent level at Netflix is extraordinarily high.
It's
So
true.
this is a consequence, and that's not random. I mean, it's a
Well,
function
yeah,
of
and I mean, like,
culture. It's a
it
function of
is.
comp.
It is.
Yeah.
But also, I think, Reed very much in the early days was like, I'd rather give the salary of 3 average people to 1 exceptional person.
Yeah. I totally, and I like that too, but most of the companies I work with are not there.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
They would rather hire a mix, especially with a lot of new college hires,
Yeah.
and develop and coach them into something great.
Yeah.
That's much more the Google model, for example. And
Sure.
so my point is I think that's sort of the more scalable approach and easily replicated approach. And it's a little tricky always because I do use Netflix as look what they did and look at how they did it. But a lot of people will come back to me and say, well, yeah, like if we had those people, but they're much more normal distribution of people at the other companies.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, what do you think about that in terms of, because now that I'm outside of Netflix and advising, I'm working with a lot of companies on just that mix, right? Because of course they're trying to build high performance cultures. They want a saturation of talent density. And it's very easy to see your shining superstars because they shine. It's very easy to see the ones that are terrible because they shine differently, right? But it's all the people in the middle. And I think that can be also a big drag on the company, whether you can move them up, right? And get them to be great and develop them or not. But I don't see companies being as critical about that layer in the organization, maybe as they should be, but maybe you see something different.
Well, this leads to another conversation, a related conversation. So first of all, you're not wrong, right? That messy middle. So that's really not a great thing, the great space. Yeah, the easy one are the 2 ends of the curve, right? It's the middle that's the hard. Now, at Netflix, there is so many institutional hiring practices to make you sure you're in that top band. And really that's where you want to be for sure. If you do have more of a normal distribution of talent, then the key, and this is in all the other great companies, this is the word you'll hear in all of them. I mean, Google, Apple, Amazon, and another great one recently is now with the change of leadership at Microsoft. They are also added to this, which is coaching. Every manager needs to be a great coach. And so the job of those people is to get those, first of all, to get the ones at the bottom percent out, but that's the obvious one, right? But more importantly, it's to get the messy middle up. And literally, like I was telling you in my first 10 years, I had people assigned to help me get better at my job. And then I was taught when I went through HP's engineering leadership training program, my job was to get people promoted. My job, because we needed the high skilled ones. We hired from schools, colleges, but we needed to quickly decide and then get them to really reach their potential, which I think is wonderful. And I've had lucky enough to have several managers that helped me get better. That's the key in those companies. If you literally don't have the skills to hire the best or the money to hire the best, then your answer is coaching.
Yeah, it's so true. So, okay, well, because I know we're running out of time, which I'm bummed about because this is fascinating. I have 2 questions for you, and it might be the same answer for both. But if I'm a product leader and I'm listening to this, what's your advice? And then if I'm a founder and I'm listening to this, what's your advice?
Yeah, well, they're both interesting questions. And my favorite product leaders are founders.
A lot of them are. Yeah.
Yeah, there is something magical about the founder product leader. And, a lot of the best companies out there.
I mean, Reed was, yeah.
Reed was, Steve Jobs was.
Steve was, yep.
Actually, Zuckerberg is.
Bezos was, yeah.
Bezos, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there is a real magic there. And I think there are really good reasons for that. If you think about the founder has been there from day zero. They have literally seen every experiment. They've seen every upset customer. They've seen every learning. And that knowledge is what we call, once you accumulate it, product sense. It's like, wow, those people, it's like they know where the market is going. And like Netflix has a long history of that, knowing where the market's going and then having the courage to go there first. Right? To disrupt themselves. That happens when you have these founder product leaders. So there is a magic there. And I love, one of my favorite kinds of advising is to help founders stay and grow with their company.
Yeah.
Because when they leave, it's usually a really precarious question. It's an inflection point in the company, and it usually doesn't go well after that.
Yeah.
So it's much harder.
It's so true. I mean, you can sort of look at all the different examples. It's kind of rare that it goes on to be what it's supposed to be without that. And it's not just vision, but to your sense, it is that development of product sense. Yeah.
And they're truly passionate about it, and they embody the culture for better or worse, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times with founders, we're coaching them because they are really creating a toxic culture.
Yes.
They might have all those benefits I just described, but they also could be toxic.
Yeah.
And so that's not good. No good people want to work there in that environment. Because a lot of times, when you're a small startup founder, look, command and control could work for small teams. And so, but once they actually get to the point where it's literally not within the possibility of one person, that all falls apart. And the only people that will continue to try to work in that environment are ones that we call them mercenaries. They'll just tell me what to do. And that's the kiss of death in innovation. So we don't want that. So yeah, that's for founders. Yeah, I would just say, don't do your best to grow with the company. Get help to grow with the company, because you actually have incredible assets that you've got that only you have as a founder. For a product leader that is not a founder, it's almost the reverse. Their job is to build that product sense absolutely as fast as humanly possible, because until you get that, you really can't do the job the company needs you to do.
Right. And that's through experimentation, testing, prototyping.
Yes, and talking with customers nonstop and immersing with the data deeply. It's talking with your engineers about what's just now possible, ongoing. There's a whole set of things we can do to help accelerate that product leaders coming up to speed and developing that necessary product sense. But it all starts with that person realizing what they don't know.
Right. If I wanted to, just as you said, I'm a product leader and I want to accelerate, and I'm going to do all of those things, how else can I accelerate? Is it really coaching or?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know what you need to do, then a product leadership coach can help you do that, because that's what they're there to facilitate.
Marty knows 50 good ones.
Right. But, I'll point out, Jessica, a coach is different than a consultant. So a consultant just will do it for you. That's what they want to do. They paid a lot more.
And that almost never works.
It doesn't, because it doesn't actually solve the problem at all. It might, if you're lucky, solve it for a quarter, but it won't solve it for the years.
Yeah.
So you really need a coach versus a consultant. So I think that's an important distinction that not every leader understands.
Yes, agreed. And if you are a leader, become a coach.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what real leadership's about.
Yeah, I love the Bill Campbell quote, which was, "You cannot be a good manager without being a good coach."
Yeah, you can't. And what a gem he was. I mean, I don't know if people know who he was, but he was a great person. Okay. So I forgot to tell you before we started recording that at the end of the show, we always do this thing called career confessions. And it's where listeners send in work questions and then we give them advice. So are you up for doing one with me?
Sure.
Okay. So here's the context. Many leaders say they want empowered teams, but struggle to let go of control when outcomes feel uncertain. What does it actually take for leaders to move from directing solutions to trusting teams? And why do so many get stuck halfway?
That's such a great question because that's exactly what I was trying to catch earlier, because the root of that is the misconception that empowered teams mean you hire good people and get out of their way. And all you're doing, and I know this sounds harsh, but you're just setting them up to fail. So that is not what you want. The real answer to that, and why the person was pointing out, it's like they only go halfway. Yeah, they do the part of hiring some good people, but they don't actually give them the information, the help they need to succeed. So that help is not micromanaging, like we said, but the help is like, okay, I'm giving you a very clear problem to solve. I'm giving you a measure of success. This is how you judge success. Your job is to improve these KPIs as fast as you can, as much as you can. That's how we'll judge success. And then your job is to come up with the best solution to that problem. And my job then in supporting you is to make sure you're making progress on that. How do I do that without micromanaging? I ask questions, very intentional questions, because I've done this job before. That's why I don't think you can actually be a coach if you've not done the job.
Yeah, kind of hard to
do. Useless.
Yeah.
So for example, if I'm coaching a team on product discovery, which is coming up with one of these good solutions, then I know the questions they need to be considering. So I'm asking, like, what are the risks? How are you addressing those risks? Okay, so you've identified viability as a major risk, and you've identified security as one of them, and legal as another. What are you doing to address those? And whenever the answer is not good, I'm like, that's not a good answer. My job is to teach you how to get a good answer.
Right.
So I'm now going to move into this coaching mode and say, okay, I've got 3 techniques I'm going to explain to you. And then I want you to think about them. And tomorrow come back and tell me which one you're going to use. And we'll make sure you're ready to go. That's coaching.
Right. That's right. Well, listen, Marty, I don't know. You've brightened my day. You've given me hope that we can navigate this plague of uncertainty, unclear things, getting more context, being a coach. I just really thank you, and thank you for the work that you do with all the companies that you work with. And if you need advice, get one of Marty's books. They're great. Also, he knows 50 good coaches, so hit him up. But if people want to find out more about you and the work that you do, Marty, where can they find you?
svpg.com, Silicon Valley Product Group.
Okay, perfect. And they can buy your books on Amazon.
Of course.
Of course. Jeff Bezos. I mean, there you go. He's everywhere. All right. Thank you, Marty, so much. This is so fun.
Thanks for inviting me, Jessica.
Thanks for listening to Truth Works.